Good morning.
Welcome back, everybody.
From Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis.
We are so happy to be back again today. Thank you, everybody, for your support yesterday. We are so happy to hear from, we heard from so many people from across the country and also in other countries as well.
So we're seeing that the room is starting to fill up nicely. Please, give us a good morning and tell us where you're signing in from. That's nice. April and I were just keeping track, and we've got people from, we've got folks from Brazil, we've got folks from Alberta Government Solicitor General's office. So yeah, thank you very much. Good morning. We're going to keep an eye on the chat today. We're going to interact with the chat today. So, and if you don't have signing authority, you might need your boss today. We're gonna try something today.
Welcome.
It'll be fun.
Sorry, we just wanted to thank you for coming to this, our very first virtual land-based conference. It's the Wîcihitowin conference. This is number 6 for us, and I'm hoping that for a lot of people, this is number 1, because we're really hoping that a lot of new people were able to attend this year because it is virtual.
Yes, and I think if you're anything like April and I, you might not have got a wink of sleep. You're excited to get back here today, and so you're really tired, but I think the neat thing about Wîcihitowin is that every time we get here, I like to drink lots of coffee, but you don't really need lots of coffee to be up and woke around this group. So super excited to be back. I think, I want to be respectful to all of yesterday's presenters as well, but I always say as we get into day 2 that, this is my favorite day coming in, right? So, they're all my favorite. Yes. That's the one thing, and I think one of the things we pride ourselves on at Wîcihitowin is that we always make it hard for you to choose a session when we do breakouts, because I think the talent that we assemble and the expertise that we're fortunate to grace our stage and our circle, they can all be filling out rooms on their own, right?
And that's great thanks to the committee in being able to choose just the right people for this conference.
Yeah, and I'll share a little bit about the recipe or the secret to their success a little bit, because going back to this, we're here to help one another. That's kind of the name of this conference, and that's something that we need to continue to do, right?
And we hope that other provinces also will start doing things like this as well. We love that. So I'd also really like to, we started this morning, Neil, with Gilbert Quistep our elder Gilbert Quistep came and joined us again early this morning, and smudged with us, and so that we could have another really good day. He brought greetings for us. He wished us a good day, and he prayed that we would all survive this COVID, this pandemic. We can't lose sight of that, and that's what we're going through, and it's part of really what this conference is about as well, getting through that fire. So I really would like to thank Elder Gilbert Quistep. And yesterday, Elder Maria Linklater was also with us. And unfortunately, she had a bit of a turn of health yesterday. So we'd like everybody to please say prayers and thoughts for Maria, as we think she is doing much better. She is at home, but please have her in your thoughts today.
Yes, all the Linklater family for sure. Please keep them in your thoughts and your prayers, and that she bounces back to full health really quick. So she just had a visit, but she is home. We were told that she is home, but I think with all of those special people like that, we always just want to make sure that they're extra okay, and that when things don't go good, that they bounce back as quick as they can. So thoughts and prayers out to Maria and her family, the Linklater family. So thoughts and prayers are with you today, Maria.
I would just like to first, for those of you who weren't with us yesterday, I just wanted to reintroduce myself. My name is April Sora. I'm originally from Toronto, Canada. I was born there and raised there, and I moved to Saskatoon 20 years ago to this Treaty 6 territory and homeland of the Métis. And my husband and I, we are both so incredibly happy and proud to be now from Saskatoon and call this our home. I work for the City of Saskatoon, and I'm the Immigration, Diversity, and Inclusion Consultant. And this is one of the single most wonderful privileges of my career, is to be able to have hosted and co-emceed with this man here for the last 5 years, and this being our 6th.
Yes, thank you very much, April. So I think, yeah, maybe in our haste yesterday, we skipped our own personal introductions a little bit. So my name is Neil Kiwistep. I'm an executive in residence with the Johnson Shayama Graduate School of Public Policy. So today, I think, so my daily work now is I kind of lead the Indigenous leadership program, and we do teaching on governance. And so today we in my classrooms, I guess, or in my spaces, they're not really classrooms. We talk a lot about governance and natural law and sovereignty and those types of things. And I remember when I first got there, it was a little bit outside of my norm and my day-to-day. But as I came to understand what governance is, what sovereignty is, I seen really quick that I was supposed to be there, and it does align, and it really does align with Wîcihitowin and helping one another out. And you're going to see, I think, as we go through and we reflect on yesterday's presentations, kind of all of the bigger connections, and that's my connection to the presentations today, and I know you're all going to find your own connection. Whether you're working in education, whether you're working in justice, whether you're working in health or social services,
Yes.
You could be working in economic development,
Yeah.
you could be an entrepreneur. So those are the types of things. We're all going to have our own threads that connect us to this, right? And that's the neat thing about what we're learning and the journey we've been on, is that there's something here for all of us, and maybe before we jump in today's program, April, maybe let's reflect on what we enjoyed most yesterday from each of the respective presentations.
Well, I was really happy after Elder Maria and Elder Gilbert opened up for us with prayer. I thought it was very fitting to have the jingle dress dancers with TJ Warren and the Walking Buffalo Singers out at Wîcihitowin Heritage Park. It was just such a beautiful, it actually reflected exactly what the day was like yesterday, which was sunny and just such a beautiful fall day. And the whole idea of going through this pandemic with the jingle dress dancers, who are meant to be very medicinal and healing, I thought that was just such a wonderful way, and just so beautiful out there at Wîcihitowin outside.
Absolutely, they're definitely one of my favorites, and I don't think we could have picked a better one to start yesterday. Just the message, I think, was so strong as far as the significance of that particular style of dance and how it came to be. And then we jump right into the Lieutenant Governor, Russ Marasty. And again, I expressed yesterday, I think, what his presence and support continues to mean to not only me as an Indigenous person, but I think the committee as well too, that he wants to be a part of this. He wants to be a part of this, and he's got a standing invitation, an open invitation, that as long as we're doing this, he's more than welcome to bring greetings and anything else that he can offer to us.
And he also, he connected also very closely with this conference again, with the whole theme of Wîcihitowin, and everything is related. And how he brought so many threads of his life that all came together in starting out with land-based learning from his grandparents, and then also into the work that he's doing with the with the RCMP, and now as the Lieutenant Governor. So I thought he was so thoughtful in what he brought to the conference yesterday.
Yeah, no, he was pretty awesome. Again, too, so I reached out to Megan right after that, and we were going to reach out to everybody. Again, it's so different this year because normally we greet them immediately off the stage and show them all the love. They're getting their standing O, and it's immediate feedback, So I hope for those of you that did enjoy any of this, please follow any of these individuals. If they've got social media, send them a message, and if there's anything in particular that stood out to you or you took away from it, please reach out to these folks. I'll get our team to maybe post some of their social media credentials in the chat, but I know Nigan is on Twitter. I know Lorna and Eugene reached out to him, and I know that your words and your comments about the presentation really meant a lot to him. So thank you very much for that. One thing I didn't mention yesterday about Nigan was, so I did mention though, some of these were pre-recorded, so we had the opportunity before yesterday to watch, but as soon as I watched Nigan's, I knew right away that he had to come back and he was going to be back. So Nigan's got an invitation to come back, as lots of our speakers do, but he's going to be joining us when we reconvene in person, right? So whenever that happens to be, whenever we get the safe that it's all clear. So really looking forward to that. And yeah, so please reach out to all of these folks. Just going back in though, one of the things about Russ Morasti, I think, was the pride in his language and that he's still speaking it, and he's, using his language as a representative sitting in the throne, of the Queen, so that tied just right into Ira and Davis's presentation, and I think some of the best feedback I think that was shared, the knowledge keepers, are always, they're heroes. These individuals can walk around wearing capes and no one would laugh at them, I think, just because of all that they put on themselves and everything that they do. And I think that's one of the things about Wîcihitowin, I think, that we're so proud and so happy, is that you won't find these stories because these champions and these heroes aren't usually telling everybody what they're doing. No. So it's really important. And again, I give my credit to my committee for staying so connected to the community and being so grounded that they find all of these individuals and we get to give them a platform. So it was awesome. And I think, Shayla Stonechild, 30,000 plus followers. So I'm on the list as well now too. So I think as many of us are, but I think, the dream is just, one of the other people in Canada that does a lot of work around children's advocacy is Cindy Blackstock. And she gives a measurement, one of the goals that she's working for in her life is children don't have to recover from their childhoods, as an outcome. So I think Shayla is a good example of that, she's starting from a really good place. So I think, that was reflected in the feedback that she got. So that was
so
really
much positive feedback for all of our speakers yesterday. We got so much positive feedback, and we were so happy to be able to present a variety of a lot of things yesterday.
So with that, how about you introduce our next speaker, and we'll go. Let's start there.
Great. So our next speaker is somebody that I think you'll enjoy very much. Her name is Marilyn Patra.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I kicked you ahead, so sorry. I gave her my notes. Our first speaker today is a gentleman who's the founder of the Think Indigenous conference. Those of you that are educators are going to be very familiar with Mr. Scribe and his family. There's some history. My dad worked with Chris's dad back in the day as well too. So he's going to start us off though with a very beautiful poem, and he's joined by his family. But my words will not do this poem justice. So please, without further ado, let's see what Chris has to share with us today.
Tansago magantik. How matagyabi. I'm very thankful to the Wîcihitowin conference committee here for asking me to come and share my poem, A Letter to Johnny Mcdonald. Just some perspective and background as to the poem and why I wrote it. It's a dedication to my children, and it's a dedication to all children, because reconciliation doesn't happen without truth. And the truth is, Johnny Macdonald was not a hero. He was not this great man who came here and connected and created a nation. Nations existed here already. We had a governance system, we had a way of life, We connected to all of these things that you see, these trees, this ground, this water, this river. They were our relatives. We lived in harmony with that. Our perspectives and our worldview was different, but it was beautiful. So this letter is about truth, because reconciliation can't happen without that. It's an opportunity for my children to know the truth, so that when they're sitting in a classroom and a teacher is telling them about the great founders of Confederation, the great prime ministers of Canada, that they can actually put their hand up and stand proud in who they are as Nakota, as Nehiyaw children, and tell and speak truth to what they know. And I wrote this poem because I know how important it is for us to connect to our identity. I know how important it is for us to reclaim our indigeneity. There is no place that exists in this world where we can go to relearn who we are. That exists on this land that we're standing on. That it exists in the designs of the beadwork in which they wear and the feathers they adorn. And those things come from this place. Those things come from this territory. And this poem is to tell everybody and to say it as loud as humanly possible that Sir John A. Macdonald failed. He failed in his attempts to what he was trying to do to us. Because of this, because of my children, and because of the thousands of children that are reclaiming their language, their identity, their way of life, and who they are. Because they're standing up and they're being proud of their nationhood. They're being proud and they're speaking their languages. Every day is an act of resistance, and it's an act of reconciliation, because we're allowed to speak these things and we're able to speak them with pride. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy this poem. Letter to John A. Macdonald, first Prime Minister of Canada. Dear John A. Macdonald, today my children speak their language, despite your approved assault on my family through an education system designed to kill us. Today my children still wear their regalia. Today my children sing our songs, despite your railroad and the massacre of our buffalo that brought us to the brink of starvation. Today my children feast on wild meat. Today my children go to ceremony, despite your laws that fined us, jailed us, and ripped our parents from our homes. Today my children give thanks for family. Today my children wear their hair in braids, despite your policies to cut our children's hair and rip them from their mother's arms. Today my children stand up with pride. Today my children would like to tell you that you have failed in your attempts to assimilate our people, because today my children are still Indigenous.
Thank you very much. Very, very moving, moving video by Chris. You know, I think the message there, we are still here. And as children dancing is just, you know, it gets me every time in the power of that. You know, for me personally, I think it just and hopefully all of us, but every time we're fortunate to hear the depth of sharing, I guess, that like that. For me, it reminds me of my dad. My dad had a pretty touching story during the Truth and Reconciliation national event times, but a very similar message, that he wanted to offer back, kind of, that we're still here, and we're still exercising, who we were meant to be. So, we were very fortunate to finally have Chris Scribe, Grace Wîcihitowin with his talent and his presence too. So, lots to take in from that one as well too.
Yeah. So
I am going to let April introduce our next guest, but I just put on my Facebook, my personal Facebook. Marilyn Patra is probably one of the most intimidating people I've ever been around, in a really good way. When you're around giants, is probably the best way to put it, that take up so much space and energy, but they don't. I don't know if you can understand that yet, but just picture the person you respect and admire the most, and you just, they give you all those feelings that you don't know how to explain when you're around them. And that's kind of what Marilyn always does for me. And I don't know her really well, I think it's because I'm so intimidated by her. So, but in a really good way, in nothing but the best way. So one of the things, we're going to read her bio, and the cheesiest thing I always say is put on your seatbelt. But honestly, this one, if grab your Kleenex, I was a puddle, I was a mess last night. And I'm glad I watched it last night.
And we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about it afterwards.
She is awesome. She's my favorite. So don't leave. That's all I wanted to say, because we're going to introduce her.
So now I'm just going to do the formal introduction of Marilyn Patra. Our first presentation this morning, keynote speaker, is from Marilyn Patra, Director of the Native Law Center at the University of Saskatchewan. Marilyn teaches in the area of Indigenous law in Cree, Inuit, Métis, and Dene communities, as well as her international work in Mindanao, informs her sensibility to cross-cultural education, governance, and negotiation. Marilyn's work with community leadership, students, and elders provides her with a strong foundation for working across the table on issues experienced in Indigenous communities and through governance in Canada today. She has worked with federal, provincial, and Indigenous levels of governance and has played a role in education for all parties in a number of areas. Marilyn Patra is currently the director of the Indigenous Law Center at the University of Saskatchewan. Marilyn attended the Native Law Center's summer program, obtained her LLB from the University of Saskatchewan and her LLM from Harvard Law School. She also contributes much of her understanding on Indigenous law from elders and the land, as you will see very clearly. She has created a number of college and university programs for Indigenous people covering financial, legal, policy, and resource management. Michif and Irish-Scottish, born and raised in southern Saskatchewan, Marilyn comes to her work in this field with passion and conviction and focuses her lens on relationship development on the Indigenous front. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Marilyn Patra.
Okay, I just want to really give some gratitude Nina Skumten for being asked to speak at this year's Wîcihitowin conference. I love being invited and I love being part of the learning and teaching that happens within the conference, so I'm really grateful for the invitation. As you've heard, my name is Marilyn Patra, Marilyn Poitras, and I'm Michif Irish from the southeast corner of Saskatchewan. I have institutional education in law from both Canada, the University of Saskatchewan, where I got my law degree, and the United States, our Harvard Law School, where I got my master's in law. I have a lived or engaged experience in litigation and negotiation, in education and mediation and nation-to-nation practices, and This experience has taken me all over the world, and I'm so grateful for every path that I've been on in the experience I've had, the path I've walked, the people who've walked those paths with me, for all of the success that I've had on those paths. And I'm indebted, really indebted, to all of the challenges that have actually showed up on those paths as well. And like most people, there have been many, and I have lots to learn. The other teachings that I've been gifted are also experiential, less institutional. The teachings that I've come to appreciate are traditional knowledge keepers' teachings with me and all the travels that I've done all over the world. They've come as stories and comments. They've come from people, young and old. They've come from pets. They've come from animals. They've come from insects. They've come from plants. They've come from birds and the earth, water and the swimmers. They've come from the sky, and of course, they've come from dreamscape. When I was really young, interacting with the trees in my backyard, the birds, the little tiny ants that children watch in the ground and scurrying around, I had no idea that what I was learning was natural law. No one talked about law like that. No one around me talked about law coming from animals and plants. It was more like just life. You just were hanging out, doing your thing as a kid. And you respected the stories that you were told. My dad and my uncle would go hunting and come back with their hunting stories, and you would hear about the approaches, and you would hear about what they saw and witnessed with the animals talking. And it was also from my grandpa talking about his dreams and knowing how long he would live from his dreams, and everybody just accepting that that was a story and that was how we were going to live. It came from brushes with the aurora borealis. You know, we had really strict teachings about not whistling with the northern lights at night. It came from going into the lake over my head as a very small child and having lessons from that, from rolling a truck on a grid road on a prairie road. Laws, those are all teachings waiting on my path to guide me. But the law lens wasn't actually my lens at the time. As I began to pay attention to the elders I was around as I got older, especially after I got my degree in law, and I started working in communities a lot more, I began to understand that the laws that I had studied in university and worked with in the courtrooms that I was in were one category of law. Something people now, I would say, refer to as man-made laws. Those are rules made up by humans to create order, to maintain power with certain groups, and maybe even to punish. The context of the other kinds of laws that I've been learning are becoming more clear, and the more I work with knowledge keepers, the more I come to understand what the nature of those laws are, how big they are, where they come from, and the more I want to share. So today I want to share with you some basic things that I've been taught as a student of traditional laws through the teachers that I've been gifted to be around. The laws, as I understand it, found in ceremony, in dreams, in visions, are spiritual laws. They're gifted to humans through their work and by giving themselves or giving their life work to those spiritual teachings. They're whispered to us. They're not made up by humans. They're not controlled by humans. They're not influenced by humans. These laws, the way I've been taught, is the laws are the highest form of law, and that not living in accordance with these spiritual laws disrupts your own spiritual path, spilling over onto your family, onto your community, into the ecosystem around you. Further, when you want to set things straight after that kind of disruption, you have to live in a good way. So P'Metswin comes into play. Go back to the way you know that honors and respects and gives back to the world, the community, your family, You yourself have to set those things right as possible after a disruption. And then, of course, you learn from the things on your path. How to live a good life in accordance with the ecosystem within which you find yourself, you must learn from actually living within it. You learn from nature. You learn from the natural world. When you disrupt the environment within which you are living, you impact not only the resources that you've taken from, disturbed without giving back, the ones you've attacked or violated, but you disrupt everything around it. This, I understand, is natural law. The natural world reaches far beyond what we can see, and it reaches as far as we can imagine, to the largest bodies in our galactic world and to the smallest microscopic entity that might show up in our lives like a germ. This is often a kind of the time that we hear things like you can feel the brush of a butterfly's wing across the world, or think about grandmother's spider, and when you touch one side of the web, the whole web is interrupted and she knows exactly where you are, where you've come from. One of the teachers that I teach with, a colleague that comes to the university and teaches with me, is a woman named Gladys Wapp has gray eyes. She has a saying that she uses when she prays and she teaches and she counsels, and she says, humans are the smallest part of creation, dependent on everything else. She has said this so many times I can hear her say it when I say it out loud myself. She teaches that when you gather plants and go out into the land, that you stay really low to the ground. I've even seen her go down and touch the ground when she prays. She stays humble. She teaches that you introduce yourself to the plant you're about to ask for its life, and that you make that offering asking for as much as you need and no more. That you would leave some for the next being that might need that. She prays and she offers tobacco. In the natural order of our relations, tobacco is one of the 4 sacred plants that we rely on. Tobacco, cedar, sage, and sweetgrass. And it's a common that these 4 plants are found in many traditional ceremonies and used in many sacred ways. Each plant is its own gift, its own story, has its own energy, has its own teaching, grows in particular places in particular ways. Each of these plants are respected as beings who speak for human in the spirit world. They're sort of like ambassadors for us, and again, a teaching for us that tells us we're actually dependent on these 4 plants. As I've been taught, or what I understand, is spiritual law and natural law are not 2 separate bodies of law. That in the way we understand in Western law and Western culture, when we talk about law, we think about separate bodies of law, like criminal law and corporate law, family law, contract law, sale of goods law. However, when you think of what is referred to as natural and spiritual law, this is a life practice. You pull from both of these fields. It guides your life every day. They're not 2 separate things. I'm not an expert in natural law. I'm not an expert in spiritual law. I'm only a student. And when I work with law students to discuss natural law and spiritual law, I bring in a knowledge keeper who carries that knowledge, and we all sit and we all learn together. That's the way we create a space for us to be able to enjoy these teachings. The knowledge keeper comes in and they wake up a part of the student, a part of somebody in the group who holds a piece of this knowledge. And the teaching is that all of us hold a piece of this knowledge. Somewhere inside of us, something will be awoke, and we can share this stuff together. We learn from each other. We're guided. How do you access this knowledge again and again and again? How do we wake each other's spirit knowledge up? Today, I have been asked to talk about something that's really, really close to my heart, and that is natural law. And I really need to emphasize how much of an apprentice I am at this. I know enough to fill a teacup used by mosquitoes at a ceremony they might have. That's my level of knowledge about this. What I hope to offer you instead is my lens for learning, so that you might open a door or a window in your mind and see teachings from the natural world in your life the way that I've been taught to do. And the way I've been taught to do this is through all of the tea that I've drank with the elders, the ceremonies that I've been through in my lifetime, the stories that I've absorbed all over the world, the food I've prepared with my teachers. All of that brings conversations and transformation of knowledge that I take very close to my heart. So having said that, I want to take full responsibility for anything I say that's not accurate or that I should know better, and say that those mistakes are mine and I own them myself. So where would we start if we were going to start talking about natural law? We could spend, of course, the rest of our lives talking about this. And so I was thinking, what would be something really basic we could start with? So I thought maybe we should start with a circle. And circle just seems like such a basic thing. And if we talk about circles, it can conjure up all kinds of images that you may have seen in traditional teachings if you've ever been around an elder. I have a story that I heard that there was a teacher in Saskatoon in a classroom, and she was told to teach the students from treaties in the classroom training curriculum that the teachers have been given. So she got her elementary kids to draw circles, and the students were drawing circles. For about 30 minutes they drew circles, and at the end of the circle drawing, she took them and said, okay, we can put your circles away now. We're going to go back to our provincial learning materials, and we're going to do some spelling. So one of her colleagues said to her, I don't understand. Like, what is the teaching of the circle? And she said, well, I don't know. Indians are big on circles, so we're going to do some circles. So it might be a little discouraging, and I was a little disheartened when I heard that they were just drawing circles, but I really have to think about that, right? What is she teaching me that's woken something up for me? And even if the teacher seems to have a superficial understanding of circles, I don't think she's alone. I think everybody has a superficial understanding of circles. I'm in my mid-50s and I still learn about circles all the time. So let's start with circles. And I'll say, what do I know about circles? What could I share about circles? How am I introduced to circles? So we can go really basic. There's lots of lodges for ceremony that are set up in a circle. So if you can imagine a Sundance Lodge, the beautiful, magnificent Sundance Lodge, and the poles that are set up and the beautiful leaves that are around it, and the center pole set up in a circle. You can imagine a teepee. Teepees are in a circle. Medicine wheels, everybody draws a medicine wheel, and we talk about the 4 colors, and so people have seen medicine wheels. Those are circles. The sun, the moon, the planets appear as round objects, and we draw circles to represent them. The pupil of our eye, the iris of our eyes are circles. The round of a bird nest is a circle. Tree trunks are a circle. There are thousands and thousands of examples of circles in nature that we could all share and say, what do you know as a circle? What do you know as a circle? And you could take your time to think about that. We also, as people, imagine cycles as circles. So you go into a situation, you react or respond, and there's a result, and then you end up in another situation, you seem to react in the same way, and we actually use circles and say circles are like a cycle. Another teaching about circles that I have that really opened my heart to circles was about 18 years ago. I was in a meeting, and the elder that was starting this meeting off for us was an elder named Jacob Bill, and I want to honor that he's the person that taught me this. And so he's a very respected lodge keeper, and we were at a very large gathering in Saskatoon. And there were elders there and government ministers, there were deputy ministers, there were all kinds of technicians and academics and community people, bureaucrats. It was a huge circle. At that very large meeting, we all sat in a circle. It took up 2 banquet rooms. It was a huge hotel. It took up 2 banquet rooms, so they split the wall open, and it took up 2 banquet rooms. And Jacob Bell began to explain to the people in the room why we were not meeting in a room with tables and a speaker at the front of the room. And of course, I'm like, I come from academia. That's like, this is professing. And so Jacob was saying, and he's a very quiet guy, and you have to kind of imagine, he speaks in Cree, he's got an interpreter, and he's gently, quietly teaching this lesson about a circle. And he said, we're meeting in a circle so that we're all on the same level. No one is higher than the next person. Your credentials, your fancy clothes, your assistant, your notepad, none of those are here. You don't have anything to hide behind. There's nothing creating a table, creating a barrier for us. We're going to use this circle that softens this gathering space, that makes sure everybody's welcome and that there's space for everybody. And we had the experience of making some room over and over for people that were coming into this circle. He then went on to teach us how to come to that space with integrity and respect, and what the consequences of not doing that and not living like that are. Like a misstep, like knowing better, knowing what your responsibility is, knowing what being respectful feels like, and then not doing that and going against it. And he gave a very long teaching after that about Pastahowin, Otsinewin, the laws of that and the breaking of those laws. At the very same gathering, Simon and Alma Kaitwehat, these are the late Simon and Alma Kaitwehat, and I've had many occasions to teach and learn with Simon and Alma, and they were at this gathering, and they were in the center of this circle. And after Jacob was finished, Simon and Alma had a small ceremony in the center of the circle, and they had a little candle and they had a little fire in the center of the circle. And they taught about the fire, and they talked about the flame of the fire. They talked about the Cree words and what they mean and where they come from and how to relate back to those things. And they taught the participants that were there that when you are gathered in a circle like that, and they gave us this focal point, this fire, this ceremony, they taught the people in the room to speak to that center. And they said, when you speak to the center of this circle, you're not speaking at somebody. You're not directing. You're not speaking across. You're just going to put your truth in the middle of the room. And you leave your words there, and they're not thrown, they're offered. They're offered as your truth. And you leave them there in an honest, respectful way, as Jacob had taught us. And then, if your words or the story that you just told resonate with somebody, it feels good to them. It maybe brings up a memory for them. Maybe you made them happy. Maybe you made them angry. Maybe you made them laugh or cry. Then the person who has that resonance with whatever was offered in the middle of the room has a choice. Will I take that teaching with me, or will I leave it here? So it's this very gentle kind of idea about what the shape was doing for power imbalances and how to share your truth. It was really important that we noticed, they told us, you might resonate with it in all kinds of ways. It was possible that people might resonate in different ways with the story, that your words might strike somebody as interesting and make them think and reflect back and say, oh, that reminds me so much of my uncle, and he was my favorite uncle, and I love that story. And somebody else at the same gathering might think, that is not how I know that story, and I think they just got it wrong, and I'm really uncomfortable with it. So they taught, and Simon has the most beautiful, playful way to talk about how stories run across a room and kind of pull on your pant leg. And he says, you decide, are you taking that story with you or not? And why is that so important is because two different experiences can come from the same story and they're both valid. The information that's shared with that story ripples out like you can imagine a drop in a pond. It ripples out and it can touch people in very different ways. And so these circle teachings were so interesting because if you think about telling a story from a Western context, you think about everybody hearing the information and hearing the same information and taking that information in the same way and having the same experience with that information. There is one truth, and we will all figure that truth out from the same information. So now if you look at it from a Cree mindset, you can see that more than one truth is actually possible because of that life experience and that life experience. So this very simple circle teaching blows what I know as truth telling completely up for me as a lawyer with a lot of training about what truth telling is. Another circle teaching that I have is found in the drum. So drums are a really crucial key element of many, many, many cultures in the world. And they're round. They're traditionally made from natural substances. You've got wood in them, you've got sinew, you've got the skin of an animal. They are struck. You strike a drum to wake up the soul. The rhythm from a drum is often referred to as the heartbeat of Mother Earth. I was in a ceremony one time in the north, and they were teaching the young children way up in the north in Iqaluit, and we were talking about this drumming, and they said it's the first music of a baby when it hears its mother's heartbeat, and you're just trying to create that over and over again. So drums, the circle, the power of a drum. My husband, Ted Whitecalf, has been a music producer for traditional First Nations music for over 25 years. And so we have a lot of drum teachings at and around our lives because he records this music. And his business tagline for his business is "The drum is alive." And so there's another teaching with the drum, that it's an entity that has life, that it's organic, that it's animate. Rocks are animate, drums are animate, water's animate. And so we've got this other teaching from this circle that brings life, and that when you're gifted a drum or you're around a drum, there's responsibilities, and you care for that drum. Someone's assigned to looking after it and transporting it and making sure it's looked after and the sinew's still working. And so there's all kinds of responsibilities that come with it. When you think about a hand drum, you can imagine when you're holding onto a hand drum and hanging onto it. If you turn the drum over, you see this cross at the back that you hang onto. So we've been taught that cross in the center that you hang onto represents the four directions, and that opening your hand and putting that in there and accepting that drum is accepting all of the responsibilities now that come with the making of the drum, the life that was given to have this drum created at all, and the music that drum will create. And so huge responsibilities. And you can imagine children being raised around this, right? So there's another way to go, wow, look at the teaching with a circle and this drum. Okay, so I'm offering actually really basic ways to think about circles, how to find them literally in the world, how to find them metaphorically in your life, how to find them spiritually and emotionally, how they can affect you. Circles are this basic geometrical, environmental, sacred symbol, and they're found all over the world, and they teach people all over the world. I've barely scratched the circle surface. I've barely talked about circles, and you can see that there's so many teachings around a circle that you can find. And walking in nature and seeing what you see, you can absorb more information. So really, no matter what the teacher in the elementary school thought she was doing, the children were drawing and making circles. They will have their own resonance with that teaching or not. They're part of our everyday lives for a reason, circles. We can talk about breaking circles. We can talk about breaking cycles. We can talk about the power of a circle. Once you're awoke to circle teachings, they show up in your life. So I'm going to say, pay attention now that you've listened to me talk for several minutes about circles. Pay attention to that. You're going to see them. They're going to be like a bullseye. Your eye's going to go, oh, wow, there's a circle. Oh, wow, there's a circle. They're just going to show up all around you. They're going to draw attention to the part of your collective memory that's trying to awaken in you. Each person has a unique relationship with circles, and it shows up in your life once you start paying attention. Another way to look at the concept of going around and giving and taking and talking about the critical teachings that I've been talking about is something called reciprocity. And it's related to the circle also. So reciprocity, giving and taking. So the elder that I would say has given me the most teachings on this is a cultural advisor, Maria Campbell. And she does a lot of teaching on reciprocity and the idea of giving and taking and sort of how that works to keep things going. This act of taking and giving back happens every day in interactions between people and plants, between people and animals, between animals and nature. It happens consciously. So I talked earlier about Gladys giving tobacco to the plant and introducing herself and asking for this plant's life. I talked about her leaving enough for somebody else. She takes that life and she makes medicine for it for other people. She puts her work into the gathering of those plants so that she can share them with other people. All of the work that Gladys is doing is an act of reciprocity. She takes a life, she gives back to the plant, and she gives back to other people. There are also acts of reciprocity that are unconscious, done without our intending, like breathing. Breathing in oxygen from plants and trees, using it to process our food, to clean our blood, and to create carbon dioxide, and then exhaling that carbon dioxide goes right back to plants and trees. The plants and trees take in that carbon dioxide and use it in their own internal systems and then release oxygen again. We have this symbiotic, reciprocal relationship that we don't have to think too much about. That just happens. Some teachings even tell us that we can identify what those reciprocal relationships are by seeing things like you can teach a child to pick a leaf and to look at that leaf and then go online and look at the picture of a lung and see, does it look like these are related at all? You can see the branches in the tree leaves. And so we're taught when you look into nature that you can see those relationships. We're taught that fruit that looks like your heart, like a strawberry, will have an impact on your heart. So there's natural law teachings in our relationship with the natural world. Reciprocity, a reciprocal relationship where each benefits goes beyond survival. This isn't you give me something, I get something, we both benefit from this. This is actually the teaching of interdependency. This is, I actually need you. So we go back to humans, the smallest part of creation, dependent on everything else. It teaches us that life is not a single direction. It's not a path you go down. It's a series of giving and taking. It's a series of learning and teaching. So reciprocity isn't just about the physical things that happen. It's about learning what it means to be interdependent with another being. For Maria, when we talk about reciprocity and we talk about natural law and we talk about nature and the world and how that works, she's very clear that the laws in nature and Mother Nature mets out decisions about the way those things operate with clear conscience. That natural elements are unwavering in their distribution of answers when natural laws are broken. And she'll just say something simple like, don't wear your coat and shoes out in the winter and find out what happens. There's very simple, basic laws about things like that. Nature knows its job. The animals, the crawlers, the flyers, the swimmers, the standing people, The plants who teach us how to live within our ecosystem know their job, and they provide examples to us every day about interdependency and what that means and how we can learn from that. And so when we learn from that, how do you learn from that? We talked earlier, I mentioned something about learning from ants. And so, as children, especially if their parents are standing around visiting, or maybe they've been told you better sit down and think about that, and they're outside and they're watching ants on the ground. Well, they're not just watching the ants, they're actually having a visit. And if you watch small enough children, there's a whole conversation going on there. So another natural law, another law from a traditional teaching that Maria Campbell teaches is a law called Wîcihitowin. And Wîcihitowin is visiting. And so this is a law that at the Indigenous Law Center at the university, we're really trying to make Wîcihitowin like the basic principle of coming together. And we're working with language to use the Cree term for it, so that we can rely on these very old, delicate ways of teaching and learning laws, of teaching and learning relationships, of teaching and learning interdependency, of teaching and learning natural law with the students. If you say visiting in English, come on over, we're going to have a visit, it kind of conjures up a lackadaisical, we'll have tea, we'll gossip, we'll sit around, it won't be relevant, I won't be taking notes, things like that. But Wîcihitowin is a richer, deeper concept than that. And so if I say we have a society and it's the Wîcihitowin society, that's much different than saying we're going to visit. And so we've been really working with language. Wîcihitowin is a responsibility to go to elders, to go to youth, to go to your family. It's a responsibility to check in, to share, to learn. It's a responsibility to create bonds, to receive and to give. Wîcihitowin establishes ties. It allows the older members in our community to be part of the lives of the younger members of our community and vice versa. It allows old people to help raise children. It allows young people to share in workloads. It allows people to guide and direct and coax and teach and tease and punish. It allows for the relationship and all of that guidance to happen. It sets the stage for interdependence, for responsibility, and it sets the stage for celebrating and grieving together. Wîcihitowin is a huge concept. My husband does a lot of work in communities, and when he goes and talks to elders, which he's been hired to do a number of times, one of the first things they tell him, nobody visits anymore. He used to visit. The whole time in the winter was the visiting time, and people went together from family to family to family to family, and nobody visits anymore. Alma Wîcihitowin, who I mentioned earlier, the late Alma Wîcihitowin had the most beautiful teachings about that. She taught that when the old are ready to leave back to the spirit world and babies have just come from the spirit world, there's a real conversation that needs to happen there. And she teaches us that spiritual knowledge, when you bring old people and babies together, is actually transferred. Not in the oral conversation that they're having, but in this cellular spiritual memory of them being in the same, merely being in the same space. She has another beautiful teaching that was about, if you think about a newborn baby and they show up and baby's hands are always tight like this, and if you try to sneak your finger in there, they latch onto it. And then if you think about these babies as they grow older, their hands aren't always in a little fist anymore. And Alma taught that babies come to the world with all the knowledge of the universe, and they let it go as they get older to learn it again in their physical being, and to give back and to learn and receive and to give all over again. And of course, the ultimate symbol for giving is our hands, right? And so there's some beautiful teachings about what reciprocity is and what that Wîcihitowin spirit is through those kinds of teaching. There's another teaching that says before babies come, before they show up on the planet, that they make a decision. I'm going to pick those two to be my parents when I show up here. And so then they come to the spirit through the spirit realm into the physical world, and they're in your life. And so my husband and I have a 16-year-old, and when he gets really frustrated with us and he's like, oh, why can't I go do this? I tease him all the time and say, you picked old parents and we got old parent laws, and so that's the way life has got to be for us. So I use things like that to talk to my son to say, this is a teaching for you. You picked this life. So geometry offers laws and teachings like circles. Acts of visiting holds laws, and even our thoughts can keep those. How we're exposed to natural law, how we're exposed to those teachings is so much different than sitting in a room with professors listening. It's so much different than picking up something and reading it or going on the internet. It's so much different than that. I'll give you the story about Wîcihitowin and visiting and the way I was shown how this law works. I was working at the University of Saskatchewan in a land management program. We had First Nation land managers from across the country, and Gladys Wapats Grey Eyes was the elder that was out on the land with us at this point. And she was coming to stay with us. We were at Emma Lake and we were all camping up there for a couple of weeks. So we spent a lot of time together, and it was August. The program contained courses on environmental law, environmental practices, economic development, business practices, plant science, and natural law. Gladys was a teacher there as well. At the end of the day, examining tree stands, learning about traditional hunting practices, and how to put a business plan together, all the students, there were about 33 students, and we had about 7 or 8 faculty with us. We all had this huge fire and we sat around visiting. And Gladys was sitting beside one of the teachers there. It was a young fellow, and he was a PhD plant scientist postdoc. And he was the one that was teaching students that day how to tell the age of a tree, how to use a clinometer to measure to see how tall the tree was without actually getting up there to measure it, and how to identify what a tree stand was. What were all of the species within this stand, and what were the short species, and what was the work of the stuff underground. And Gladys was fascinated with this and talked about how the trees talk to the mushrooms and how the ferns talk to the trees, and teachings like that. So they were sitting together, and as dusk started to approach, Gladys looked over at me and she said, you know, I was reluctant to come here with you. I didn't want to come. And she didn't. I coaxed her into coming. And she said, I didn't want to miss my window to gather my medicines. I rely on those medicines every winter. And look, and she started pointing randomly around this circle. So it's getting dusk, there's a fire, the students are all visiting. And I looked around and she said, do you see? There's fireflies all over here. And of course we could all see these fireflies lighting around us. And I said, yes, I see them. And this young scientist was sitting next to her and he said, I don't get it. Like, what do you mean? And she said, well, of course I have a contract with those fireflies. I have a binding contract with those fireflies, and now I have no choice. I cannot go pick those medicines. They both rely on the same plant. She needs that plant, and so do they. And she has been taught that if she wants access to that plant, not only does she have to introduce herself to it, make the offerings that we talked about earlier, she's been taught the role of the firefly. She's been taught about the cycle of a firefly. She's been taught about interdependence that she has with the firefly. And the firefly needs the same plant as she does, so she has to share. And one of the indications of her time is up for harvesting is the firefly shows up, so she can no longer pick. It's always been that way. She was taught that from the time she was a child, and she talks about it like a contract. So the laws of nature are, I have a contract that I can't break, because if I break the natural law I have with that, I've not only impacted myself, but the firefly and the plant and the season that I picked it in, and anything the firefly is reliant on. And so you can see it ripples out and out and out. Of course, I love this story because in your imagination, if any of you know Gladys, I would just love for you to be able to do this. In your imagination, you can imagine Gladys as a small girl sitting in a negotiation with a representative from the firefly community, and they're negotiating this contract about what will that look like and who's going to sign and when are they going to sign and what is each person committing to. The story of the fireflies and binding contracts brings in cycles and seasons and reciprocity and visiting. And if you're a really keen listener, you're going to want to study the plant that firefly has been taught to you. You're going to want to study the fire. You're going to want to study the firefly. You're going to want to study how you visit and understand that you actually have a contract with that bug. You're going to know what to learn from what is said to you and what's not said to you. So there's another thing that goes against sort of a Western legal notion. It's as important what is not done and not said as what is said and what is done. What you hear and what you know from your relationship with nature, natural law, is a very individual experience. I spend a lot of time in my career working between groups, community, governments, nations, students, academics, organizations. I've heard a lot of people say our traditional teachings are being lost. Our language is being lost. The laws are in our language. The elders are dying. There are libraries. We're losing all of this information. As somebody who's a student of the knowledge and somebody who is absolutely committed her life to making sure that we have these teachings, I panic. I panic and say, what are we going to do? You know, how do we create more opportunities to have elders in the rooms with us? How do we create those connections? Where do we set up this visiting space so that we can keep these teachings alive? So I went to my teacher. I went back to Gladys. She comes and does seasonal pipe ceremonies in my home. And so we went to her and said, this is what I'm hearing. And she came outside and she looked at my mountain ash and she looked at me and she said, do you really think humans would be entrusted with something like that? Do you really think that laws are ours to hold? Those are the laws of nature, and they're kept in nature so that we can go and get them and learn them over and over and over. Of course it helps if you have a guide. Of course it helps if somebody teaches you, encourages you, and helps you through that. But it's sitting right outside your window. So she says, go to nature and get those lessons. What are the plants in your backyard? Outside your patio? What's the plant outside your bedroom window, the first one you see if you look outside? What animal has crossed your path? Right now, where we live, there's a young buck that keeps showing up in our yard, and he's really adorable. And there's 4 deer that are in the neighborhood, and they're around a lot. And it comes at night and sleeps right under our tree in the front yard, like just absolutely no fear. And I also have a 16-year-old son. And so there's not a mistake that this young masculine entity is showing up when I have a 16-year-old son in my life. And so I'm paying attention. For us, it's not a coincidence. It's fall in Saskatchewan, and if your home is overtaken by maple bugs on the outside, or you start to find ladybugs everywhere, there's a teaching in there. On a drive a few years ago in my neighborhood, I had an elder that I was bringing to my home, and we were driving past every yard, and we kind of drove around in the neighborhood, and there were a lot of dandelions, and every yard had dandelions. And it's a community that has big yards and people look after their yards. It wasn't sort of natural growth that there were dandelions. These are manicured grasses, and they're full of dandelions. And the elder says to me, do you see all the dandelions in your neighborhood? And I said, yeah. And she said, a lot of cancer, hey? And I said, what? And she said, yeah, that plant is offering itself because that's the cancer plant. People should be making teas and paying attention. There's a lot of cancer coming. People should know that. I grew up around dandelion making, wine making, tea making. I had a grandma that made remedies. And so it was like, she woke that up for me. Oh yeah, we had dandelion tea. It was really bitter. I remember that. If you live in the country, you see fields and gravel roads. You see wildlife. Gravel roads can teach you lessons you can't learn anywhere else. I've rolled a vehicle. You have so much respect for loose dirt after you do something like that. How fast you can go, how fast you can't go, all of those kinds of things. If you live in the city, you have yards and grass that we talked about. You have plants and trees around you that are groomed. You'll have mosquitoes and mice and robins. You'll see Johnny jump ups, you know, the little purple and yellow flowers. You'll see Johnny jump ups that have literally lifted entire concrete pads, lifted entire roads, and this little tiny green tendril shows up, and then a little yellow purple flower after that. What is the teaching of that? Why would you witness walking down the street with your children concrete that starts to come up like this, and then boop, a little tiny flower shows up, a little Johnny jump up shows up? That little plant is teaching you something. And every time I see a Johnny jump up, I say, Marilyn, if you think you aren't strong enough to hold your life up, you're so wrong. This little plant is teaching you it can lift concrete. Surely you can lift the load that you have on your plate right now. The very best part for me of learning natural law is that when you don't know what you're learning, when you see something that makes you curious, that you want to know more, that you'll go and follow your curiosity and ask somebody else about it. Find out whatever you can about what you've just learned. So Wîcihitowin kicks in, and so now we're into another teaching. And when you go to somebody else to visit, Maria Campbell would say, did you take them something? Because you shouldn't be the only one benefiting from that. They should benefit from that visit as well. So I want to say thank you for your time today. Thank you for the invitation to speak at the conference this year. Enjoy the rest of the conference. I hope everybody gets some time to stretch and shake your sillies out in the middle of every presentation, in the middle of your living room. Go for a walk. It's fall in our province right now, so look at the crows gather, watch the spiders curl up in their webs in the corners of all our doorways, and watch the skirt fall off the trees and say, there's some law going on around me. What is it? And pay attention. Thank you so much.
Wow.
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 Um,
Overwhelming.
Thank you very much. I know some of you might have been like us, and it froze a tiny bit at the end. The video was buffering, but that was the end. Thankfully, the timing was perfect on that. Yeah, I think.
Can I
Please,
just
yeah.
say one? I just want to say one
Compose,
thing
please.
before we go into our sort of our debrief or conversation around this. Just want to let you know the schedule says that this program is going to end at 11:30, our Saskatchewan time. And Neil and I are going to continue to talk a little bit past that. So please, of course, feel free to move on and do whatever you need to do. We know you're busy. Appreciate your time here so much. But we are going to continue because we want to give Marilyn Patra's presentation justice. And talk about it a little bit, as well as we'd love to give some shout outs to a lot of people who are supporting us. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to turn it over to Neil. This particular presentation is very close to Neil's heart. It's what he's been putting his life into most recently in the work that he does. So he felt an incredibly, although, I mean, we all appreciate all of them, but we all connect in different ways. And I think for you, Neil, this one truly connected with you in some ways that you never expected. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Neil now to do a little bit of just how did you connect with this, Neil?
Yeah, I think, and I was following along with the chat on that, and so thank you very much, April. But there was, so I got a chance to watch this one last night, and I just kept on filling up page after page after page of so many different
Learnings,
teachings and understandings, and I think this you could watch that video 1,000 times and take something new from it every time. I think, you know. So as April mentioned, this video this portion is scheduled to be kind of I know in your programs it says over 15 minutes. We'll do our best to end there. We've got a couple other ideas that we don't want to cut into the afternoon session too much. So for those of you that have other commitments, we can appreciate that you have to go. But I just wanted to mention a couple of things in respect to Marilyn's presentation. Wîcihitowin, you know, was one of the hugest ones, and I wanted to make sure that I captured that amongst many other messages in there. And I think, you know, that's, I think, going back now that we've all had a chance to watch her presentation, you can appreciate that she didn't give us any Harvard teachings. You know, as much as people like me wanted the Harvard teaching, and I respect anybody that, you know, has been able to achieve that and those things in that part of the world, in that part of our lives. But I think, you know, what I've been taught to look for and what I've been taught and who I've been taught to follow are people just like Marilyn and everybody that she mentioned. She mentioned some really powerful people there, you know, that teachers that have been impactful for her. I think natural law, she really gave us a good understanding and her perspective on what that actually means. And its connection to Wîcihitowin, its connection to Wîcihitowin, its connection to this year's theme, Through the Fire. And I think we have a lot of administrators. We have a lot of service providers that are participating. And I want to tune you in to some of the messages, because these are the answers to kind of what we're trying to accomplish in our day-to-day jobs. You know, some of the outcomes we're working towards here. And the answers are baked into these concepts and these teachings. Wîcihitowin, you know, I work with communities I work with First Nations governments and leaders that are working on everything in their community. Mm-hmm. And some of the most important thing, you know, that all of our governments are working towards, you know, improving quality of life and those types of things. But one in particular, you know, is working on restoring inherent rights. And inherent rights is, again, it's probably something that you could just have for a long time, but it's exactly what Marilyn says. It's just all of the stuff that is going to be here, taking place no matter what. And it's up to us to tune ourselves into some of those teachings. And so inherent rights, I think of that, and I think of Wîcihitowin. I think of, I used to work in public health. You know, and we used to offer parenting programs and those types of things, you know, and I only imagine, you know, I cried last night, wishing that we brought some of these teachings inside of our curriculum, wishing that we brought some of these teachers. I'm working with my son here, you know, over the past couple of days. And I wish when I was a younger dad, I could have taught him some of those stories. I could have understood some of those teachings. I could have understood the gift I was given that time. And I think it's connected and it's powerful, and I think because that's what we're trying to do. That's why we started Wîcihitowin. We want to help all of this stuff. We want to just fix all of that. We want to make sure we don't have to clean up any unnecessary messes, if you will. You know, we want to make sure that right out of the chute, parents, you know what the job is, you know, to our young people and our responsibilities. She talked about Wîcihitowin as a responsibility that we have. And lots of us as young parents, we don't know what those responsibilities are because of things like residential schools, things like public policies that are targeted towards certain populations. And these things that Marilyn talked about were directly in the crosshairs of governments at the time, you know, and so we're still just cleaning that up. And so the neat thing is, you know, once we work ourselves through the fire and the tears and all of the hurt, is there's an answer on the other side. So that if we only put that back in, if we could only, now I could just, so why I was so happy and upset at the same time was I could imagine, you know, Alan Prosper, one of our facilitators, now teaching young dads that story of that Wîcihitowin hat from Makwesagagan First Nation, taught them about that little baby and what they're holding.
Mm-hmm.
Powerful, you know, I think it just, I can only imagine, you know, how much what that teaching is going to actually give to the rest of our society. You want to improve economic development, you want to improve health indicators, you want to improve justice indicators, you want to improve educational outcomes, then those things just need to be put back up in their rightful place. It's like this bottle falling there and then just putting it there. And everything can still exist around this bottle. You know, we just have to restore and give something back that we targeted and said, no, you can't have that. You know, and that's these Indigenous stories and these teachings. And so I'm so thankful, you know, that we have someone like Marilyn Patra in our society that has gone to achieve this mountain of achievements. Harvard University, director of the Native Law Center and all of these places. And what she wanted to share with us were teachings from back home and all of these, you know, teachers that she's learned from, you know, and I just think that's, I can't tell you how much I respect that. And, you know, I think of the story of Gladys's, you know, that she shared, you know, the story of the fireflies, you know, for those of you that are working in natural resource management and are watching some conflicts going on in our country, you can look out east and you see there's a lobster fishery that just opened with some of our Mi'kmaq brothers and sisters. And there's dispute happening, you know, and you talk about some of the things that are missing in a federal plan or whatever, whoever makes those rules. But imagine if it just included some of the teachings and understandings. Imagine, I'm sure there's a similar story to that lobster that's unique to those relatives out east to hear, you know, and that's about eco-management and that's about resource management, you know, solutions to today's ills and challenges. Marilyn's here on there. Oh my gosh, Marilyn is there. Holy smokes, now I feel even more. I gotta be really good. Okay, so I don't want to get any of this wrong. So that's lots of pressure. But I just think that, see now again, I lost my...
Your train of thought, that's okay.
But please.
Okay. Neil, I know Marilyn Patra, I felt the same way when I first listened to her teachings and this presentation. I called a friend and said, you know, you're going to love this. You're going to really, really be moved by this presentation. Marilyn taught me so many things in this presentation that I'd never heard before. And like you said, you know, if more people really listen to this and take away the learnings and apply it to our systems. When we talk about what's going on, the racism that's happening in our communities, if we apply a lot of these natural laws to our systems, I think it can make a big difference. And, you know, they are such basic fundamental things that, you know, we give and we take. We breathe in, we breathe out. You know, we take from the earth, we give back to the earth. So it's, you know, it works the same way in our systems that we're taking from our employees, we take from our Indigenous employees, we expect so much from our Indigenous employees. What are we giving back? What are we giving back to them? You know, I think it's very fundamental that when we're, you know, it's that give and take. So many learnings from that presentation, Marilyn. I feel a little bit nervous.
Yeah,
She's
no,
watching.
and I'm back, and I'm not gonna read any of his
I know.
comments yet, I'll go after, but one of the things that, again, for me, and I hope it was the same for many of you, and I hope you were gifted with something there. Some of the things that have been talked about Indigenous knowledge, you know, is that they're stage development stories too. And I could have been taught this and told this as a 20-year-old man, 25-year-old man, and it would have meant something totally different. You know, for this particular point in my life, you could see I'm starting to embrace, you know, my role as a father. You know, it took me a long time to, I think, really to get that. But I think it's a lot of survival that you have to work through, a lot of that guilt and decisions that you made as working through survival. And I think, you know, over the years of Wîcihitowin, we've talked about those stories of survival and some of the guilt associated with that. And I think, you know, from an outcomes perspective, and again, going back a little bit to yesterday, those young people that we had, you know, I think that's the goal, you know, I think as all parents, that's all we want, is we just want our kids to be whatever they decide to be and however they decide to be. And these answers and these presentations are, you know, these are the tools that we need to put back in the hands and in the tool belts of all of our services that we offer, in all of the communities, in all of the families, in all the homes. You know, so this is what was taken away. This is what needs to be put back. We don't need to innovate something different and go to some fancy school. We need to go to all of our respective backyards, and we have to access this knowledge. Marilyn gave us some great direction, though, on respecting the protocol of accessing that knowledge too, right? So that's another thing that I appreciate. One of the things that she said, though, is everybody has something. You know, and there's processes. She mentioned circles. My dad has taught me that's one of the ways to access this, you know, and to be inclusive and to have conversations in a circle. Marilyn shared with us, you know, some of the institutions might not understand and have the depth of knowledge, but they're trying. And that's one thing we need to acknowledge, is that trying. And so, but she mentioned something, you know, and she mentioned, you know, through this exercise, waking something up in all of us, you know, and I thank you, Marilyn, for waking that up in me. The other day, you reminded me of another teacher I've been fortunate to have, you know, that I hold in the same reverence as you. Saxon, his name is. His name is Herb George. He's the hereditary chief of the Frog Clan in Wet'suwet'en. And for those of you that, you know, this man had a pretty big job. And he won a case for all of us, you know, to recognize oral history as being a valid primary source in the Supreme Court of Canada. And but that was one of the teachings, you know, that, you know, Marilyn, you reminded me of, was when you bring us together and you gather us and you exercise Keynote, you know, you bring us together and you let us talk about this, and I'm still just going to understand that. But you'll wake something up in all of us, because just like Davis and Ira said yesterday, that's not dead and it's not gone. It's just sleeping, you know, and that's how you do it, you know. So again, I can go on and on and on, and I don't want to. Well, I do, but but I know lots of people have other stuff to do. But you know, I just, please continue to unpack all of these teachings.
Please.
You know, we tried to bring you the best all the time. I've got a little bit of a challenge, you know. I talked to Eugene Arcand. He called us a little. He just called. He called and said he would like us to do something. He challenged April 9, all of you, to learn something in your own language. Learn one word. Let's start today. And I'm going to issue my own challenge after this one. But learn one word in your own language, and just any word, whatever it is, and just, it's yours, you know. And he just asked us to take one step closer, you know, to who we are and who we were meant to be, and what are our own inherent rights. So April's got one. As soon as he challenged me, I knew the word already, and I wrote it down here. Wîcihitowin, I want to say, in mine and Soto, That's the first natural law that's given to us, you know, from Creator. That's what I was taught. Roger Ross taught me that. And he said, Wîcihitowin, you know, and Soto, that means I love you, you know, and that's the first law is love. So, Wîcihitowin.
So my word did not come to me right away, but my friend Tracy here brought it to my attention, and it is the absolute perfect word. So my word in Japanese, so I'm third generation Japanese Canadian. I never have spoken Japanese. I know a little bit. But when I was in my early 20s, it was the first time I ever found a real true pride in who I was and in my ancestry. I grew up, you know, trying really to not be Japanese, and a lot of us did. We were taught, I think after the internment in my parents' life, they were, you know, very ashamed. They were very ashamed of being Japanese. And so it did pass down to us as well. But I think the first time I heard the Japanese drum, I remember hearing it on stage and my dad was still alive then. And I thought, I'm going to play that drum. I need to play that drum. It spoke to me so loudly. And the word for drum in Japanese is taiko. And taiko has played a very, very big role in my life and in my connection back to you know, to who we came from, and mostly for my history, which is the history of my parents and grandparents, and that is of the internment and displacement of the Japanese Canadians. So, you know, to sort of be able to reclaim that was incredibly important for me. And I thought it was also very, very, very connected to Marilyn's presentation, where she talks about the circle, and she uses the drum as the circle and the sort of the skin, the natural skin. And also in Japanese, we also talk about the heartbeat, and that the drum is the heartbeat of you know, of Mother and Mother Earth and the Mother. So it was a perfect word for me. So Eugene, thank you for asking us and challenging us with that question, because it really made me think, and it really did help to connect sort of myself and my ancestry, which Willie Ermine always said to us, you know, that our ancestors are always sitting with us in the room, and they're always with us and holding us up. So, and that's helped me every year that I've done this conference. I always think of all my ancestors and who is sitting in this room with me. And right now, you know, I feel my parents in the room with me.
Thank you. And again, Rich, thank you for sharing that, April. I want to, we're going to try something here. I want to see if we can actually raise some money today. And raise some money, I want to just show you how easy this can be. One of the things, since I kind of moved over to my other job, is kind of in a little bit of a teaching role, and it's different. But the neat thing and the best part that I enjoy the most is just to show you how easy it is. So the goal today, and that's why I asked you this morning, is if you don't have signing authority, hopefully you can go and find it. And it's lunchtime. People are just they're happy when they're eating, so they're close. So we want to raise $10,000 today. We want to raise $10,000. Please, if you can contribute anything through the chat. And we don't want it to come to us. We just want it to go to wherever your respective community that you live in. We want it to go there, and preferably, you know, hopefully for this exercise, it's going towards some Indigenous kid, you know, trying to realize their dream. So in order to get to 10,000, before we shared it with a few people already, and so we're up to 5,000 already. So Wîcihitowin is going to donate $3,000 to our local Saskatoon Indian Métis Friendship Center. They host an annual grad for Indigenous grad students that are graduating high school and going on to further their studies. So we will donate $3,000, $1,000 going to First Nations, male, female, and a member of the LGBTQ2S communities. And $1,000 going to the Métis students of all three of those respective identities. So that's going to be our $3,000. So please someone keep going. So also I see some U of S folks on here. I was put in touch with a gent he owns Momentum. It's a local store clothing store and apparel store in Saskatoon. He wants to donate $1,000 to an Indigenous student at the University of Saskatchewan. So I think we have someone from from Jackie Ottman's office. I seen Liz Durrett sign in. I seen a few other folks. You might have to just get in touch with us so we can connect this individual. We also have another $1,000 donation anonymously coming from First Nations University of Canada, someone associated with that group. So we're already up to $5,000. So by the end of the day, please, and I just want, part of the exercise for this is, it's just to show you, Wîcihitowin started with $40,000. And I know lots of us don't have $10,000 we can go to the bank. I don't, I can hawk a bunch of stuff and I might come close. But you know what? In some of our respective roles, a couple grand isn't a lot of money, but it goes a long ways at helping, dreams come true, and hopefully seeds like this being planted as my hand just comes under the. So I know our friends are going to step up a little bit. I seen one of our friends from Nutrient signing in from Calgary. We have a lot of Government of Alberta folks there. Yeah, let's see if we can get there today.
We have a lot of people that that have been signing in today that we kind of wanted to give a shout out to.
Yes.
Maybe we can do that now.
Yes,
and
please.
you talk about Nutrient. I'd like to give a shout out to Lisa Mooney.
Who's so far away from work, so I'm borrowing her pin again, and she's signing in all the way from Toronto. So even if you don't have money though, donate time, donate your time, show up, and if you're a boss and you don't have money, let your employees go to these engagements and circles.
Yes. So Lisa, shout out to you in Toronto with Katie and Joseph there. Hello to all of you. I'd also like to thank, of course, and give a shout out to Tracy Mugley, who does a lot of good work for the community at St. Paul's.
Yes,
Hospital.
and she's first got me engaged with the Community Foundation.
Right.
Big shout out to Anita Ergaloo, who is my son's professor of sociology, who also represents the Open Door Society. So he's skipping class to be here today, so it's a pretty good reason.
And also, I'd like to thank Jess Ham and her team at Saskatchewan Intercultural Association. They are doing a lot of good work in it's supporting the Anti-Racism Network of Saskatoon. So thank you so much, Jess, and your team there. And of course, we have to,
I hope Frank and Barb Badger are watching.
Yes, well, Frank and Barb, yes. Thank you. But I wanted to give a really big shout out to some very special people. Tennille Thompson, who has supported us very strongly. She is my supervisor at the City of Saskatoon. And she has 3 members of her team here today. So she's picking up a lot of work because we're not there for 2 days. But Tennille, thank you so much. I have to say, I have learned so much from working with you. And also to Kevin Kitchen, who gives us a lot of support in what we do. Without people like that in organizations, we cannot do this type of work. We really need that support. I don't know how many people are often told, no, you can't do that. It's not your job. But you know what? This is truly all of our job. So, they recognize that. And so thank you both to Kevin and Tennille, and to our team as well at the City of Saskatoon.
My boss is pretty cool too, but he's not watching, so I'm not going to give him. But we have lots of awesome people here. We know everybody wants to get some food in their bellies. We have an awesome program this afternoon. Again, we're going to hear from our survivors this afternoon, and we are going to hear from the children of survivors this afternoon. So please join us this afternoon. We have a nice long break baked into this one. We are resuming at
2 o'clock.
2
Our
p.m.
time.
Saskatchewan time.
We will get the emails, right? Yeah.
Okay,
you'll get
perfect.
your
See you
email.
there. And please go get your boss. Get some. We got $5 grand to go.
Right.
Let's get there.
Yeah.
And it
lots
doesn't
of
have
time
to come
do
here.
it.
It'll go to your own community. And we are going to also. So who's that? I'm at GS. No, it doesn't say a check.
Okay, so
we'll keep going. Let's keep going.
We can't do this without investors. And if you'd like to be one of those investors, by all means, again, please connect with us either through our website, through the chat, any way you want. We are happy to. We cannot do this without people supporting us. And that money goes to the Indigenous community always, always.
And you'll probably get a tax receipt anyway, so you'll get to write some off too. So there's
That's right,
lots of
Neil.
other incentive where you
Neil
can,
can make it all happen.
don't worry, we'll get there today.
Great.
Okay, thank you. See
Thank
this
you.
afternoon.
Have a good lunch.